like putting the code in for like XST and SQLs and, you know, on the websites and things like that. So I'm struggling.
Yeah, and again, it's just yeah, the more you do it, the more you'll become familiar with it. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. It's just, as I say, a lot of it is repetition.
Yeah.
Like for myself, I've been doing this for over 15 years now, and I remember the first time I was trying to just do something basic, and
yeah, I hear
you. The amount of mistakes and everything. I'm going like, what's this PHP thing? How is this different than a HTML? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think I spent a whole week on this one thing, and if I tried it again, it would have let me in. But you know, that's how you live and learn, don't you?
Exactly. And you know, especially when we look at our labs as well, remember everyone's training on them boxes. And what I say to a lot of people is, before you actually run your scans and assessments, or before you run an exploit, reset the machine.
Yeah, I found that a few ports fell off and then open and closed quite a bit. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because because when you're learning, you're going to try like things that you know may work. You're not too sure, but you're going to go anyway.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes that would take down a service, but that's something you can learn from as well. Because if you do that in a real environment, that does get a little tricky.
Yeah, it's good this environment here.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, thanks.
No, all good. So as I say, don't stress about it. We're here to help. Just, you know, reach out anytime that you are a little bit confused about something. And hopefully tonight you'll get a little bit of an idea of my methodology, my mindset. And like, I'll do a lot of it manually because I do write a lot of my own scripts that automates a lot of this stuff as well. So I'll take a step back and do like from the basic for you guys.
Thanks.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'll share my Kali screen now. Okay, can everyone see that all right?
Good.
Okay, B, can you see that?
Yep, all good.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so as I mentioned, guys, the host I'm attacking, it's on my network. But I was given this machine from a friend of mine who created it for a capture the flag event. So I've got absolutely no idea what services are running. So it's a completely blank slate for me. So I'll talk through it. And as you've got questions, or if you're not sure, if you want me to go a little bit deeper into any of the stuff that I'm doing, just reach out, and yeah, we're happy to pause and just go through little things as well. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is, okay, I know I've got a machine, it's on my network, so I'm on the network. If you've connected to the VPN going into the lab, yeah, you want to go through the stages discovery, as we've mentioned. So you're going to look at how you can find different machines on the network. One way to do that is just using a net discover, but I'm just going to set up my terminal here and create a new session. It's almost like I need some background music or something going on. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is run a net discover. And another thing I might do is just find out what my IP is. Okay, so I can see I'm on that subnet there. So I'm actually going to go back up and make sure I'm scanning that interface as well. Okay, so NetDiscover, interface, and I want to have a look at ETH1. Okay, and then so I'm going to copy that. Just so I can take my notes, because it's very important as you're going through your assessment to always take notes. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm sitting around 128 actually. So let's just cheat a little bit. Okay, cool. So I can see there that I've got a ping there from 172.16.0.128. So that's going to be the host. So now I want to do some enumeration. Okay, so let's kill that pane. We'll kill this. Okay, so when we run Nmap, you've probably seen, and as you've gone through the course, you can do a number of different flags to go through. And you know, you're taught the -SS for a sing flag. So that helps you if you're going up against firewalls and things like that as well, because when you've got your connection, maybe in the previous courses, you've covered a 3-way handshake. So when you do a SYN scan, it will send the first one, it would get the acknowledger back from the server, but it won't send that third link. So it actually helps you to break down the packets and really start to look at bypassing your firewalls. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is just I'm going to run some safe scripts. Okay, can do all on that, and yeah, let's just run that. And this is just doing your basic scans. So it'll do your top 1,000 ports for you. Okay, so while that's running, shouldn't take too long. Okay, so while we're waiting for this scan to complete, does anyone have any questions about when we're going through and doing these types of scans, what we're looking for, or anything like that? And any initial questions? Nope. Okay. Okay, so as you can see, we've got a couple of things here. We've got port 21, FTP. And we've discovered that it's got anonymous login. Okay, so that's one thing that we want to have a look at. You've got SSH port open. Okay, port 80, HTTP. So as we only went through and tested the top 1,000 ports, I'll run through and I'll do another Nmap scan now. And we're 128. And this time I'll do all ports. Once again, I'll do safe scripts and all output. Okay, so I'll run that. And while we're looking at that, I'm going to copy these. Okay, and just keep that in my notes. So now I've got that. Let's have a look at our FTP because we're able to see that we've got anonymous login for that. Okay, and no password for anonymous. And you can see we've logged in there. So we'll have a look at what is in that file structure. And we can see here, we've got a folder called pub. So we'll see what is in there. Okay, so there's nothing really in there, but now we know we've got FTP access. And we've got a folder pub. Okay, now we'll have a look over here at our full scan, and there was no additional ports found. So out of all the ports, it did everything. So we can get rid of that now. Okay, so what I want to do now, we've had a look. We know that port 22 SSH, very rare that you'll get a weak password that you could brute force that. So generally that would be a last resort that I would be trying to look at. You'll find a lot of your attack vectors, a lot of them will be around your websites. It's one of the largest attack surfaces that we have. And looking at how we can utilize that to get ourselves a shell on the machine. So what I'm going to do now, we'll bring up good old Firefox. When it eventually comes up. Okay, and what we're going to do now, we're going to have a look at 172.16.0.128. Okay, we've got the Apache homepage. Now, if we come back over and we want to run a couple more scans. So who can tell me what could be another scan we could run, knowing that we've got a normal website running on port 80? Anyone? I'll give you a hint. It starts with N-I.
K, maybe?
Maybe a K? Okay, we're going to run Nikto.
Nikto.
There you go.
There we
you
go. Okay, so now Nikto will help you find quite a lot of vulnerabilities in different websites, and also some different file and folder paths as well. Because what we want to do now that we've looked at we've got a website. So when you're enumerating your website, there's a number of different components you want to look at. And that is, okay, are there any additional folder structures that are pertinent to that website? Are there any pages that you can't see? Is there a robots.txt? You know, really trying to work out what that website's for, or if there's any hidden subdomains within that as well. So Nikto will help you find a lot of that, as well as things like Dirbuster, where you can actually brute force the directory structure of the website. So we'll just let this run. And we'll come back over here, because I mentioned one file there, robots.txt, that we always want to have a look and see if that's there. Can anyone tell me what the robots.txt is used for?
Is it a file that normally can hold passwords and information like that, and user access?
No, that you're thinking of your host file, but you're on the right track. The robots.txt is essentially there for search engines. So when you've got your search engine, say you use their web crawlers, and they will go through and they'll look at every website, and in that robots.txt, it will tell you what directories or files the search engine can populate and have on their website, and what is disallowed. So what pages are not allowed to be indexed on a search engine. So that's the purpose of the robots.txt. And as an attacker, if you can find that, it would genuinely tell you of different pages that obviously you can't find by Google or anything like that, that may be different login pages, hidden files, hidden websites, anything like that, that could be of extra value to you as an attacker to gain more information. So here we can see, okay, you are not a search engine, so you cannot read. Okay, that's interesting. So we'll have a look at the page source. It doesn't really tell me anything there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend to be a, who should I pretend to be? I'll try and be Google. Okay, so I'll pretend to be Google and I'll change what's called my user agent, which user agent is generally what identifies if you're a browser, if you're a application, or if you're a search bot or anything like that. That's in the back of the header of the websites. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have Firefox imitate Googlebot and see if that allows me to see anything on this page. So I'm just going to go to, I think it's about config. Memory. Okay, and I'll search for user agent. And okay, so we'll go new. I'm just going to go. And let's say Googlebot. Okay, so now I've modified the user agent to say I am Googlebot, and let's go back and see if that, So you see that that changed and allowed us to actually read the user.txt. Sorry, the robots.txt. So if you have a look here, okay, user agent and disallowed, I've got another website there. So does that kind of make sense now, as I explained before, about if the search engines are going through, they will have a disallowed of what they can index, and that is where we can go for what they're not allowed to index. And they'll also have allowed and things like that for what they can do. So let's have a look. Okay. So here we've found another web page that we want to start to enumerate as well. So let's go back and see if Nikto found anything. Okay, nothing. It's not much help to us there. So let's have a look. I'm going to check the page source again. Okay. By the looks of this, it's possible we might have a local file inclusion. So obviously I want to check for that. Obviously it doesn't look like there's any databases or anything really running on there. So I doubt there's any type of SQL injection or anything. So the only thing I can really think at the moment is I'll test for local file inclusion and I'll see if that does anything. So we'll go back to the main page. Let's go. I'll try a couple of different variations. Let's do. Ah, bingo. So as you can see there, can anyone explain the file that I just I printed out there? Okay, make it a bit bigger so you can see it.
Yeah.
What can you tell me about this file? No wrong answers. Have a guess.
Is it showing privileges?
This is the Passwd file. So in Linux, your password files, just like in Windows, you've got what's called a SAM file, and that's where it keeps a lot of its hashes and passwords on Windows. In Linux, you've got two files. One's called your Passwd file, which is this, and that identifies all the different users that are on the system, but it doesn't include the password hash. The other file you have is what's called a shadow file. Now that shadow file, that is what includes the hashes, and that generally has write privileges that only the root user can access, where the passwd file has the ability for everyone to read that information, but not actually write to it. Because when you have a look at the way this is, you can see you've got the user here is root. This X here denotes that the hash is actually part of the shadow file. So when you look at privilege escalations, for example, if you as a normal user have write access to this file, you could generate your own hash and replace this X with your hash and then log in locally because you modified this file. Because it would look for this for the password, and because it's not an X, it won't look to cross-authenticate with your shadow file. So this here is generally accessed by all users. It's found in etc passwd. Passwd is the name, and it tells you all the users that are on the system. So you've got all the different system users, but you can see here, Tom looks to be the user that is on the system. So it's a bit of enumeration that you've got there, and easy to file to check on a Linux system for if you got any type of read access through the website. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to put that in my notes. Okay, so now I've got local file inclusion. I want to try and take this further now. And I'm kind of thinking of two different things. Remember, first of all, when we enumerated, so think about the information we've got now. We have identified that we have anonymous login via FTP. Now, I would be thinking, am I able to upload my own file to that and then use this vulnerability that I found to read my file? So if I'm able to put my own PHP script onto that FTP and then call it via that local file inclusion exploit that we just demonstrated, it's possible I can trigger a shell back to my computer. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just thinking about the different things that I could possibly do here, but already just thinking of that there. And remember, one of the big things that why I'm thinking that is we've identified the permissions that we have. So we can see that we've got full writable permissions to FTP. So I know that we can upload our own files. The only trick is right now is where is that pub file on the local system? Okay, so we're going to have to try and find that now. So using the local file inclusion, we're going to have to find the location of that FTP. So just thinking in your head, looking at what we found in the enumeration, we've got the type of FTP service it is. So what we want to try and locate is that configuration file. So I've got a good idea where that actually is, but if you didn't, and if I didn't, I would just jump on Google and I would do a search for SFTP configuration file, default location, or something like that. And then I'll just try to see where I can find it. Okay, is that a little bit clear? At any stage, if I'm going too fast, guys, just feel free to jump in and I'll slow down. I'll explain things a little bit more if you need to. Okay, so ETC, which is when we have a look at the Linux file structure, this is where a lot of our command and control applications and software are. So we'll have here FTP / vftp d.conf. No, okay. Okay, and see, now I need to try and find it. So if I got Google Access, probably not. Okay. Um, Okay. So as you can see, it's all a process to try and find exactly where you're looking for and what you can find there. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so I'll just switch over and see if I can find that location. Okay. Okay, you guys can still see that all right, yeah?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, so with a little bit of trial and error and a little bit of help from our friend Google, we've pulled up the location. Okay, so here is the configuration file for our FTP. So what we're going to look for now is anywhere it says what folder it is actually sharing. And it should be down the bottom here. Okay. So we can see down the bottom here. Try and make that bigger for you. Okay. So anonymous root equals var FTP. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is let's see if we can create our own little shell to upload and take it from a local file inclusion to a remote code execution. So I can take control of system calls and run commands on that machine. If I can do that, then I'll be able to call from that machine a shell back to me. Okay. Any questions just that with what we've gone through there, guys?
Russell, can you just repeat
Yeah.
the last minute?
The last minute?
Yes, please.
Okay, from whereabouts? Just explaining this file, or?
Yeah, just once you got to a non-root, what you would do after having discovered that.
Okay, so now, like as I say, now that I've discovered the local file inclusion, the next stage is trying to give yourself access to run commands on that system, known as a remote code execution. So if I'm able to upload my own PHP script, which I'll write in a minute, I'll do that and then check if I can then trigger commands on that host system. So I'll be able to run who am I, run different bash commands and things like that. So it's taken it to that next elevation of a vulnerability.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no worries. Okay, so what we're going to do, let's just run a little script here. I'll do it from Aries and then FTP from there. Cool. I'll just call it command.php.
Are we able to zoom in at all on your terminal window there?
Yeah, definitely. Let's go.
I've just kicked the kids off the laptop, so I've got microphone now.
Yeah, all good.
Day 3 of the kids at home, and I'm ready to run away.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Okay, so how is that big enough for you guys to see?
Yeah, I can read it now.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just writing a simple PHP script here. Okay, so system, what I want to do is run a get call because we're running it over PHP. And what I'm going to do, that get call, I'll just use my name. So it'll be Aries. So Aries is going to be like my control prompt, which I would then have Aries equals whatever command I want to write. So yeah, I can call this whatever I want. Like if I wanted, I can put, CMD for command or anything, but I just, out of habit, I just put me. Okay, so close off that. Okay, so brackets are closed. and I'll close my PHP. Okay. Okay, so it's a very simple script. So this is very basic PHP. So it starts with your brackets, question mark, PHP. So the script can denote that it's going to be a PHP script. I'm calling a system call on the host system. And I'm going to use a get request with my command to run on that system. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my FTP and I've probably been locked out. Yep. So I'll reconnect. But before I do that, I'll make sure our command script is there. Yep. So again, is that that terminal window big enough? I'll make it one more bigger. There we go.
Yeah, that's better, I think.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we know we're anonymous. Okay, and it helps if I can spell. Okay, so now we want to go back to, as I say, run dir. We can see that the folder is pub. So we're going to change directory to pub. And we know we have write privileges. So one thing I didn't cover, but if you log into FTP, if you're not sure about what commands to write, just write a question mark, hit enter, and you'll see here all the different commands that you can run while you're in FTP. Okay, so I don't think I can clear. No, okay. But what I want to do now is put our command.php onto the server. So transfer complete. So dir, we've now put our script onto that server. So we'll go back over here and remember the location we found was var space / FTP. And then because we're in the pub folder, it'll be pub / our command. So we'll do that. Okay, so var / cmd dot php, and we'll go and Aries equals ls. Okay, so as you can see there, we were able to execute the ls command and print out the contents of that folder. So if I run another command now and do whois, okay, so it doesn't like whois. What about host name? Okay, host name is darkness. Okay, and we'll try who am I?
Mm-hmm.
And we are www data. Okay, so as you can see now, we've escalated our attack vector, and we now have the ability to run commands on that machine. Okay, so does that make a little bit of sense on how we got there, taking a local file inclusion and then changing that to give ourselves that execution?
Yeah, that was good.
Yep, excellent. Okay, so what I want to do here is there's a few ways we could do this. I could either use a new PHP that would be a reverse shell, or I can use Metasploit to try and catch an interpreter shell, which I might do that one and just show you guys another module that is part of Metasploit that allows you to generate little quick snippets of code, because obviously not everyone is good at coding. So I'll show you that method and see if we can get a shell that way.
Is that using Venom?
No, I'll actually use a module itself called web delivery.
Okay, cool.
But yes, MSS Venom I'll use generally to generate all of my payloads, and then I'll upload that.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, so I'll create a new window. Okay, I want to make sure I've got my database running. And we'll start up Metasploit. Okay, so when you look at Metasploit, you've probably had a bit of a play around now, and you've seen you've got various modules. So you've got your exploit multi-handler, which you use a lot to catch your reverse shells and to set up your listeners. And then you've got all your various exploits that might be a direct exploit if you're attacking the machine and things like that. Now I'll show you one that will allow you to actually generate a script as well, because we want to use this vulnerability that we found to run a code execution, to run a PHP code execution to call a interpreter shell for us, which it might sound a little bit complicated, but it's pretty easy to do with the module. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, there's a couple of ways you could find the script. So you could just go search web delivery. Okay, and you can see there's a couple there. So what we're going to use is the script one. Okay. So use exploit. Scripts web delivery. Okay, let's just do that again.
So you can just type there use one and it should just load it too, shouldn't it?
Yeah, that's another way you can do it as well.
Yeah.
So there we go. And then show options. Okay, so you've got a couple options here. So you can see already that by default, this here, it sets up a Python script. Okay, so already we know we're going to have to change the payload and the target because we want to generate a PHP script. So what we're going to do, we're going to set our payload as PHP interpreter. I want reverse TCP, and we'll do show options again. Okay, so you can see now our payload is set up as a PHP interpreter. Listening port's going to be 4444, and I need to work out what my IP address was again. I think it was 129 or something.
So it's obviously really important to take notes while you're doing this, Russell.
Exactly. Because remember, everything, all the steps that you're doing now, you'll put into your report. Because the idea of your report at the end of any assessment is that the person that is reading it could replicate every step that you did without being technically proficient. And that will allow them to, work with their security teams to really mitigate that vulnerability or that method of entry. Okay, so we're going to set our host to 172.16.0.129. Okay, and what we want to do now is our show targets, because we need to change that to a PHP, and target PHP is 1. Okay, so set target to 1, and let's exploit. And again, if I can type, there we go. Okay, so what it's done there, it started up our listener, and it generated this PHP line here to call back to our listener. So what we're going to do is copy this and go back up to where we have our code execution, paste our code that was just generated, and enter. And as you can see, we now have a interpreter shell. Okay, so we'll have a look at our sessions. Okay, session 1, we are the user data, and we're connected to darkness. So what we're going to do, we're going to connect to that and start to have a bit of a look around. So if we go sessions, okay, -I, and we're session 1. Okay, so here some of the things you can do is you could try get system and things like that if you're on a Windows box. There's a lot of different post modules that you can use with an interpreter shell. If you're never too sure about what you do have available, just press the question mark and it will bring up all the commands that you can use while in the interpreter shell. So you can background it. So if you want to run any post exploitation modules, you can background this and then use that post exploitation module and direct it to this session. You can use, you get UID, so you know what user's being used. You can search, you can sleep. There's quite a number of things you can do. You use a lot of Linux commands. If you're on Windows, you can upload and download files. It just makes it very easy and user friendly. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to jump into, I'll drop into a shell. Okay. As you can see, I don't have a TTY shell, unfortunately, which is not ideal. Okay, so just having a look at that there. Let's do Python minus C. Okay, import PTY. Okay. This might not like it, but we'll see. Okay, probably won't like the double quotes. Okay. Let's just do that again. Okay, and this code that I'm writing here, you can find quite openly. If you do a search for, you know, Python, TTY, or reverse shell, or shell, but I'll also post it in the forum so everyone can just copy and paste it if you want. It might be easier. And okay, close the brackets there. Cool. Okay, so you can see that now has given me a more useful command line. So I can see exactly where we are, what users we are, and everything like that. So what I'm going to do is go back to our var / ftp / pub. Okay, so there's our command. So what I'm going to do while I'm here, because I know I can upload more files, I'm just going to upload different scripts to do a little post exploitation and to have a little bit of a look around to see what I can find on the machine there as well. So, and while I'm doing that and copying it over, does anyone have any questions they want me to go over while we're having a look? Silence.
I've got a question if nobody else will go.
Yeah, go for it, mate.
If you're able to find out user information, could you then take a note of that? So use it basically to conduct some reconnaissance on the users that have access to this system, and then go to other systems that the users might have access to.
Exactly. So when you're on a on a machine, like always during your post exploitation, you want to try and get your highest level access of privilege. So if you're on a Windows machine, if you can get NT authority system, you can use Meterpreter to dump all the password hashes for every single user. And what you could then do is use that user and that password to attempt to connect to other systems that they have access to, because a lot of users have a tendency of reusing passwords. So you would generally find that if you can enumerate all the users, that gives you a very good, strong starting point on how you could potentially traverse a network. Does that answer your question there, Sims?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. Okay.
I have my defensive hat on asking that question.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Because that's exactly it, and that's like when you're in defense, you really want to know, okay, what's your password reuse policies? What are your password changing policies? All these types of things, because that could lead to, let's say, for example, you know, worst case scenario, you got a low level access user and you got their password, but on another system, they were actually administrator. So straight away, you've got onto another system as this user, as now the administrator. And even worse, if they're on a Windows enterprise and they're a domain admin, you've now got access for the entire network to do whatever you like. So it is one of them things to really be aware of. Okay, so what I'm going to do is reconnect. Okay, and I'm going to upload I think that's Limpy's. Yep. Okay, so now I'll go back to our shell. And now you can see that we've got my little script here. Okay, so this script as well, I will share the GitHub repository if you haven't got it already. I'll just post that on our forums a little bit later as well. So you can go and have a look at it and download it. It's very good for using for enumeration. It just automates a lot of the stuff that you do manually, and it's a bit of a time saver. Okay, so we're going to give that execution privileges. Ah, that's interesting. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is, can we move that to temp? Because we might have more privileges there. Okay, so you can see I tried to change the permissions of a file within the FTP folder, which we only had write privileges to. So that could be actually affecting us being able to work with that folder, that file. So by moving it to temp, generally the permissions are a little laxed in your temp file. So it might give us the opportunity to modify this a little bit. Okay, and in a Windows scenario, you've generally got what's called an app locker, and that is the same. There's certain folders within the system that they can't really lock down that heavily due to the fact that it will affect the operations of the software. So if you ever find that you get into an issue where you can't if you can't run or change permissions or anything of an application, just test if you're being stopped by any of these types of defensive measures. Okay, so okay, so you can see by changing it into the temp, we had permission to change and give it executable rights. So now we're going to run this one. Okay, so this is essentially running through all the different checks for us. So you can have a look here. It's got a legend on how it prints out the color. So red and yellow is 99% a privilege escalation vector, and it breaks it down there for you. So as you can see here, Linux version gives you the kernel version and a bit of information there. When you're starting to get this information, who could tell me what would generally be looking at for the version number and why we might be looking at that for?
Basically, with the old versions, it will be easier to exploit if it's not patched up to date.
Yeah, definitely. So you're finding out, obviously, the older or the lower the version number is, the more likely it is to a kernel exploit or a known exploit. So yeah, right on the money there.
And we just go and research what's already been published on those and then just go for it.
Yeah, pretty much. So the
Yeah.
only things you'll generally need to change is the local host number and whatever port number you're going through. But yeah, spot on the money. Okay, so here we're just going through, I'll go through this slowly when, has it finished yet? Yep, okay. So I'll just go through this slowly because there is a lot of information that it spits out, but there's only a few things that we really want to look at and would go back to if we were really having trouble. So where are we? Still looking processes. Okay, here we go. So as I say, we've got the kernel information, which again, as you guys mentioned, yeah, we're going to have a look and see if there's any kernel exploits or anything available for that. Personally, and you know, out there in the wild, a kernel exploit will be your very, very, very last resort. Because it's very easy that you could take down the system, or it could stop other services from running and everything like that. So unless you've tried every other resource, then go for your kernel exploit. Just because, yeah, in a operational environment or a production environment, you don't want to run that risk of really taking down the system. But obviously, in our training environment, yeah, go wild, go nuts. Okay, so here you can see the path of the user, and it showed us that, okay, we were able to modify that path. So that could come in handy. We're having a look at the environment variables. Obviously, you don't need to worry too much about that at this stage. Useful software. Okay, so you want to know what types of software is running on the system. And this comes back to, as we were just talking about, the kernel exploits. So for example, you've looked up a kernel exploit and you find that the exploit is written in the C language. You want to try and make sure that the host system that you're going to exploit actually has GCC installed, so you can compile the C program. Okay, if that makes sense. And also, if you need to run a Python exploit, you just want to make sure that the software is available there for you to be able to run the exploit that you found. If not, there may be another exploit created that is with a software that you found that is actually installed on that computer. So just having a look at different ones that are available. So here you can see, okay, we've got different versions of Python. There's base 64, okay. This comes in handy for the simple fact that some of these applications do have exploits to them themselves. So for example, older versions of Nmap runs as sudo, and you can spawn an interactive shell just through the commands in that. So very important to have a look at the version numbers of different applications that are running. Okay, here that's just a lot of processes that are being running. You don't need to worry about that. You can see where it called my reverse shell. So as a defender, you could see how this could be very useful for you when doing a incident report or something like that. You know, Simeon can probably expand on that a little bit if you want to, Sims.
Yeah, well, you're looking for artifacts that indicate when and how the exploit happened. So something like this is obviously a good find.
Exactly. So even though I'm using this tool to attack the system, it can generate quite a lot of useful information for you as a defender as well, because you're able to pick up and have a look at different processes of running, and you can start to also paint a picture of potentially the techniques of a specific actor and what they do on a system. So here again, different binary permissions that are set. If there's any cron jobs that are set, okay, so cron jobs in Linux are just like your scheduled tasks in Windows. So you just want to see if any of them are being run, and if they're being run as root. If they're being run as root, you want to have a look at if it's a custom script that is being run, and what are the permissions on that script? Are you able to modify them? Are you able to rename that script and put your own script in there with the same name and things like that? So looking at how you could exploit that. Most of these are daily, so you don't worry about that. You'd be looking at, you know, what's run more regularly in our type of environments. Okay, different services are running. Okay, I'm not finding too much useful information yet. Okay, any applications that are listening locally. So if it's running a SQL server, you might only be able to access that locally. So now that you're on the system, you may be able to try and log into that MySQL database. And a lot of the times, it's sad to say, a lot of people don't set a root password for their MySQL installations. So as a user, you could generally log in locally to that MySQL database as root with no password. And then just as a low privilege user, get full access to the database on that system. And it's unfortunately quite common. Okay, so looking here, nothing too much. bin.bash. Okay, you can see our home folder. Any sudo users, so we can see root's the only sudo. Okay, last time logged in. Password policy, pretty bad. Pretty much never expires. Okay, so here you found readable configuration files. So once you're on the system, you go have a look at the different configuration files and see if you can find any passwords in there. This script will actually check a lot of these configuration files automatically for you, and it would print out if it found anything. So it doesn't look like it found any passwords in the files that it checked there. Okay. Nothing too exciting yet. This could be an interesting vector. Okay. Okay. Can anyone spot anything interesting that I just noticed in this section? There's a lot to guess from there, and I won't take any wrong answers. That anyone could just have a throw at it. So to give you in context what this is, these are all executables on the system that are not necessarily part of the standard install, or based on the version, are known to be exploitable on various applications and systems. So for example, the mount application is exploitable on some Apple computers back on OS X Lion. Excuse me.
Would the pseudo line there be of concern?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. So sudo, obviously, you'd have a look at the version, because some versions of sudo have got known exploits to them as well. So excellent. Yep, you would definitely have a look at the version number for that. Anything else?
What about the root shell down the bottom?
Perfect. So as you can see, all these are getting run out of the user folder, but then you've got this one random executable being run out of the user's home folder. And the name saying root shell is definitely something we want to take note of, and we'll go and investigate this after we finish having a look at the rest of the information. But definitely, these are the types of things that you want to just be aware of and be on the lookout for. Something that looks a little bit out of place, where you can definitely see this file does. So yeah, good call there. Okay, SGIDs. Okay, so that is where you've got your group ID is set and possibly exploitable there. So it's run when it's got a group ID set. That means it is locked to a specific group, and anyone in that group has the permissions to run it. Okay, so okay, so not too much there. Yep, definitely we want to have a look at that root shell. Okay, it's just picking up our files there. Backups are another good thing to look at, but these are just images, so you won't find too much on that. Okay, yeah, world writable files they're trying to look for. Excuse me. Okay, not much there. Okay, different packages, you might want to investigate that. But I think at the moment, that what we found there might be worth more investigation. But you can see here it's gone through checking all the different file systems to see if it could grep out any passwords that are within the file. And sometimes you'll find some low-hanging fruit, and it will print out a password for you. So what we're going to do is go have a look at that file. So we're going to have a look at home. Before I move on, I know that's a lot of information there, but does the process that I was thinking through it make sense to everyone?
Yeah, I think so. Did you say that script's just on GitHub, is it? It's a pretty common one?
Yeah, this is just a common one. And any scripts that I use in this, I'll link up in the forum as well.
Yeah, awesome.
And you can just jump to, I'll even put my GitHub page in there, so you can jump on there and have a look at some of the repositories and stuff that I've forked and started, and just get an idea of different things that you could be looking at.
And I think you said it before, just a case of repetition.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And the more you can do it, the more confident you can get on it, the more you'll just really lock down that methodology for yourself and that thought process. And that's the thing, yeah, repetition is key with this. Okay, so ls minus la. Why would I do -la when doing an ls command?
A's for all, so hidden files.
Yep, exactly. And the L will put them in a list and tell me the permissions on all of them as well. Okay, So you can see there, I've got all the permissions here on the left. I can see the ownerships, and I can see any of the hidden files as well. So here, you can see that the root shell is owned by root. But we can see underneath it that the C source code is actually this user's. So I'm guessing he would have created the shell, created the C program, jumped into a root shell, sorry, and then compiled, and then a root has ownership to it. It looks like we have permissions to execute this root shell. So let's see what it does. Okay, not much. So what you can gather here, it's going to be doing some sort of check to see what user we are. And if we're Tom, it would drop it into being a root shell. So this is pretty lazy, actually. So he doesn't have to put a password in. And obviously it checked that I'm www data. So, okay, there's not much I can do there. So let's have a look and see how this program is actually scripted. Okay. So here you've just got your basic C headers. Okay, it's got your main function. Okay, printf, checking if you are Tom. Okay, so that was that first line that we saw, this here. So it's printing for us the that question there. New line. Okay. Okay, that's interesting. It's opened up the application Who Am I? Taking the input and checking who we are. Confirming that if we are Tom. Okay, so user. Okay, so for me, the key takeaway right here is this. Now, not sure, does anyone have, you know, I'm just chucking it out there. Does anyone have any programming knowledge or background and could hazard a guess what could be an issue with this line? Even you, Baruch, or Simmons, feel free to have a guess at this.
Wouldn't this just be an extra layer of defense?
Not quite.
Could you potentially change the who am I call for the username?
You're thinking along the right way. Okay, so if we think a little bit higher, there's no absolute path to that application. So my thinking is, if this is going to call the Who Am I script, I'm going to write my own Who Am I script. And as we saw when we ran that script, we were able to modify our path, which when we do, so if I do, for example, okay, if I have a look at the path, it would generally go from left to right. So when it's calling this Who Am I, it's having a look at the user local SBIN for the Who Am I application that is within that folder. So my thought process here is, because there is no absolute path, I'm going to create a file that's called Who Am I? and I'm going to change my path to the first part of the path will be the folder that I'm actually in. So when I run the script, it's going to call my created folder, file, before it looks for the real one. Did that make sense to people, or I can go over that again if you like?
So you could make a who am I file and put it in, for example, the temp directory, and then add that to the path at the start.
Exactly. And then come back and run this root shell. And in theory, that should call my file that says I'm Tom. And then it should make me root by the looks of this script. Okay. Yeah, did that make sense to everyone? I'm happy to go over it again if you want.
So we discovered that we could edit the path variable with the last script you ran, wasn't it?
Correct. Okay, because I don't think I could scroll all the way up there. So I'll have a look, see how, well, oh, that's not good. No, so yeah, one of the very first lines when I ran that script, it showed us that I was able to modify that path. So I should be able to do that. So I'm just going to go to cd temp, because we know the file permissions are a little bit more laxed here. So what I want to do is echo print f, okay, because remember this is the function the C script is calling, and we're going to call ourselves Tom. We're going to close them brackets, and let's export that to a file called who am I. Again, it helps if I can spell. Okay, so let's do that again. Echo printf Tom, and we're going to send that out to who am I. Okay, so if we have a look now, we have a who am I application there, well, a who am I file. And if we just cat who am I, you can see it printf Tom. Okay. So what I want to do now, let's give that full permissions. So because remember, if we're going to run an application, we need to make sure we give it the correct permissions to run as an executable. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it read, write, executable, just a lot. Chmod 777. Who am I? Okay. Now let's do export. Export path will equal. Now we're going to start it in our temp file. And we're going to put that at the start of our path chain. Okay. So we've put that in, and you can see that's gone through. So let's just do echo $path. Okay, and you can see here now, it's going to look at our temp folder first. After that, it will look at the local sbin, and then the local bin, and then user sbin, user bin, and so forth. Okay, so let's go back, and hopefully this will give us a root shell. Tom. And we're going to run. Perfect. Okay, so you can see now we ran that. I checked to see if we were Tom. We told it we were Tom. And it says access granted. So who am I? Tom, ID. User ID is set to root. Okay, so now we have full root privileges on this system. So ls. Okay, let's go cd. We want to go into the root folder. And do we have a flag? Yeah, we do. So cat.txt. Perfect. Okay, so that box is now fully compromised and we have full root privileges. So, we could cat the etc.shadow file now, because I'll show you in that, as I was explaining that before. Okay, so you can see here that there is the root hash. So if you had access to the shadow file, you could now take this offline and try and crack the root password. So you can have persistent login to the system. So you could always log in as root. You can see Tom's password is there as well. And that's where I was explaining with the Passwd file, it had the username and then it had the X there. So the X will tell the system to check in the shadow file to make sure the password is correct and then give you access via that. Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
With the password file and obviously the X for the shadow file, which is only accessible by root, if we can get that hash, how are we able to use that hash?
Okay, so if you're able to get hold of the shadow file and take that offline, what you would do is put in a file and use John the Ripper is one, or you could use Hashcat. And both of them applications will use a word list. Like you can specify the word list and you can start to brute force that hash offline. So not actually on the host system. And then, a lot of the times if that happens, like if I get that in a real environment, generally we've got computers that are fully set up. So applications such as Hashcat can use full ability of the CPU and GPU to crack really complex passwords. And so, generally you would copy it, take it offline. When you use John, okay, let me just open up a new window here. Okay, so you've got what's called unshadow. So you would copy both the Passwd file and the shadow file to your computer. Use unshadow. And you can see here the usage is put your Passwd file and then the shadow file. And what it does, it will spit out a file that is a combination of the two. So it makes it easier for John to actually crack it. So you would just go unshadow Passwd if you saved it as Passwd, and then shadow. If you saved it as shadow, and then you could send that out to, let's say, a file that you decide to call hash.db. Okay, and then you would use John with a word list. So your syntax with John would be John kind of, see, I'm terrible at spelling today, aren't I? Okay, word list equals user share word list. I haven't unzipped that, but you could use rocku as a word list, and then you'd put in, if we called it that
A file, right? Yeah, file name.
ashes.db, and then it would go through using the word list to crack that offline for you, which then you would try and log on to that system via SSH or some method there.
Yeah, cool. No, that's what I thought. I just wasn't sure on the actual cracking the hash.
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll come back here to 3. So yeah, as I say, that is a lot of my methodology from start to finish. Obviously, you'd be taking notes all the way through it. I generally use Cherry Tree for all my enumeration. So Cherry Tree, you can set up your little cherries for enumeration, and you can save your pictures, take notes. I have this already set up as templates that I use on every system, just so it gives me a reminder of what I'm putting in each section. I've got missed notes here, some TTY shells. I'd copy in the root flag or anything of value in here, and then when I'm finished, I can actually export to PDF. So it helps me structure my reports a lot easier. I can export it in different file formats, and I can then use to create my my report at the end. So for example, as you're going through doing your VA, enumeration, you've got all your port scans, you've got your different version numbers, you've got, okay, you had anonymous FTP, break it down into what you found, what versions they are, if there's known exploits to it, if there's a known CSV for it, and CVE, sorry, and really give as much information and add as much value to the client as you can. Because a lot of the times, the people that you're handing your report to are not technically sound. A lot of people that you'll deal with out there, especially when you start getting into the defender and analyst area, as you start moving into incident response and stuff like that, you'll be dealing a lot with directors, and a lot of them don't have a strong technical background. So it's important that you're able to take this technical knowledge and then explain it in a way that is understandable for the non-technical and how it's going to impact their business. And that will add a lot of value to them, rather than just saying, okay, port 80 is open, port 20 is open, and things like that. It's more about, okay, I found that you had FTP available on port 21. It was running a VS FTPD version of 3.03. It was set up with anonymous access, which allowed me to actually have a look at that file system. The file permissions were set to Readable. I tested and uploaded a text file and confirmed that I was able to put my own created files on that system and things like that, and explain how that could be a vulnerability or how that could impact the business in some way. So really trying to put yourself in the shoes of a director or a stakeholder that, it may be someone from finance, it may be someone from, it might be the head of marketing. A lot of CISOs and stuff out there have actually come from a finance background. And the more you can really put what you find technically into layman's terms, but then also have a step-by-step playbook of how you exploited it when it the report eventually goes to the technical team, you're going to add so much more value to that client, and they're going to continually come back, because there's a lot of companies that don't even go as far as giving that type of detail.
If I can add to that, Russell, yeah, basically, if the guy who's paying the bills doesn't understand that first of all, that there is a problem, and then to, form some image in his mind or her mind as to what the problem might be, then there's not going to be any action on it.
Exactly. If a company can't see that it's going to actually impact the business, and you'll learn a bit more about this when you get into the CSA course. When you start looking at that, when you start looking at risk assessments, you've got to be able to quantify the impact to the business. And it's our job as security professionals to be able to relay that in a way that allows them to both qualify and quantify the information that they're given, and the impact that is going to have to the company's bottom line, essentially. And that will determine how they approach your discoveries, or what you're facing in the SOCs, and things like that, and can also affect your budget for the following year as well. And it all comes down on how you can relay the information, and the way you can explain it that they can relate to, if that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Just from my career, I know the people who can be simple are the ones who get the money.
No, exactly. So you got to think, not everyone is technically minded, and you guys have probably experienced that coming through all this training to now. Just trying to get your head around, just to do what I did there tonight. Imagine trying to explain that to someone that hasn't even done some sort of foundation technology training. All they really know is how to log in and use an Excel spreadsheet. So really putting yourself in the shoes of the people that are paying the bills, and have a think back about the VA reports that you've possibly already submitted, and just self-reflect and think about the quality. Is there things that you could have done better, and take it really as a learning and a stepping stone, and as you move forward through this training and career path, because it's definitely a very valuable skill that you can work on. So what I'll do now, guys, because now there's nothing left to do on that machine now. I might as well open up to any questions if anyone wants me to go over anything with them. Did you find this useful? Is it something that you may want to see again at some point? So yeah, fire away.
Russell, I mean, obviously you've got a lot of experience, and when you saw the vulnerabilities, you didn't have to think too long before coming up with a couple of ideas as to what you might try. For somebody who has less experience, what sort of decision or consideration process would they go through to come up with a couple of ideas to try? Yeah,
so you generally go back to your how, what, and whys. So you look at every other application that you find, or any service that you find, and ask yourself what type of application is it? What is its function? What does it do? How does it operate? So why does it do this? The things that it does? So you're really trying to understand what you're looking at, and once you get an understanding of that, you're able to think about how that specific application will actually work with other applications. So, for example, you saw at the start, we found that we had a web application. We know a web application running PHP does a lot of its own running of code in its background. So it interprets things on the server, so on the host side of things, where HTML is all on the client side. So knowing that, and the fact that we were able to upload, we had another service we could upload to, we wanted to see if we're able to run PHP pages from the website, is it possible that we can run our own, and how could we do that? So it's really just taking a step back and having a look and trying to understand the behavior of applications. And this helps as well when you're trying to defend things. Because if you don't really understand how an application may work with another application, you might decide to completely quarantine one service and greatly impact the operations due to another service not being able to run correctly. So just taking a step back and looking at, okay, what is this application? What is its function? How does it work? Is it running on server side? Is it running on the host? Is it something that's running locally? How does it work? And then obviously why is it running? Why is it on that system? What's the purpose of that server? So for here, we've got a web application and an FTP. So here, we're making the assumptions that it's a web server that is also serving as file sharing capability within the domain. So really trying to get an understanding of the host itself, what its function and what its ability is. And that will also help you narrow down what type of things you're going to be looking for. So for example, if you're dealing with a mail server, you're potentially not going to be running an FTP server or another file service on the same thing. Or you may not be, if you're a Windows system, you wouldn't be running a mail server or a web server on your domain controller, because they're very different roles that that system will play. And just having an understanding of what is the purpose of that actual machine as a whole, and using that same methodology and them same questions for everything that you can discover and find. Does that help sort of explain that a little bit on my thought process?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, any other questions, guys? Did you find that useful?
Yes, thank you. I learned a lot off that actually.
Excellent.
And
Yeah, that was. I'm going to watch it a few more times.
Yeah, definitely. So what I'll try and do is get this up and running as soon as I can for everyone. And then, yeah, if there, as I say, if there's any other questions, definitely reach out to Baruch and I. And yeah, we'll try and answer everything as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
And yeah, like as I say, like the course itself, guys, yeah, we're not trying to teach you to be, expert hackers and stuff. It's just trying to think about these things and the quality of the report writing that you do. So have a think about the things. If you get stuck, reach out. We'll try and get these out, the videos out as soon as we can, so people can review them. And I'll also link on the forum, my GitHub page, and some of the scripts that, well, pretty much all the scripts that I used in this for the demonstration as well.
Yeah, awesome. I think one thing I'd like to see a bit of is like with the interpreter, for example, getting a shell with payloads and targets and stuff. I understand, but I'm having a bit of trouble with the privilege escalation once I've got a shell, and just working on that, especially with sort of PHP and that sort of thing.
Okay.
I guess just going forward, yeah.
Okay, certainly. So, you know, if we looked at, let's do this.
I mean, obviously, I know that you can, in interpreter itself, depending on the target, there's, you know, privilege and get system and stuff. But if we're using like a PHP reverse shell, for example, we don't have some of those options sometimes. So just, I guess, where to go from there to look at escalating privileges.
Yeah, definitely. So when you look at that, there's a couple things you've mentioned there that you could break down. So let's say, for example, you're using Metasploit and you've just caught a regular PHP shell. So it's not a interpreter shell at all. Okay. So in that situation, okay, let's clear this. There is actually a module, shell, I think it's shell 2. Okay, you've got shell 2 interpreter. Okay, and this will upgrade your basic shell that you've caught to a interpreter payload and create a new session for you.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, so let's go options. Okay, so here I'm still in there, so let's go. Okay, so here you would set your localhost, change your local port. It's generated a different one for you anyway, but you might want to change that to anything you want. And then you set the session. So for example, I think we're on session 1.
Mm-hmm.
So you would set your session to 1, and then you would run this, and it would spawn a new shell for you as an interpreter.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay, and that works with any of your basic shells. And then it's just making sure you select the correct payload. You know, whether you're going to use staged, unstaged, and things like that, depending on the system you're running. But again, a little bit of trial and error and a little bit of practice, and that will become second nature as well.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, that's sort of, I guess it's just, as you said, it's just trial and error and playing with it and whatnot. So
yeah, definitely. And like when you look at this, like Metasploit is a fantastic framework. But I do encourage you to, if you are able to exploit something directly through Metasploit, try and do it without. So just catching a very simple netcat listener. See if you can find the same exploit on exploit database or using searchsploit that might be a Python variant or something like that. And just see and practice doing it so you're not 100% reliant on just the one tool.
yeah, I think that's exactly right. Because I guess with Metasploit and Meterpreter is it's quite automated. So I guess understanding what's going on behind the scenes and getting those little scripts uploaded yourself to through whatever means, SSH or vice versa. I think yeah, that's what I've got to work on. So
yeah, definitely. And like, let's say for example, you know, eventually you decide to go for certification exams such as OSCP. In their exam, we're not allowed to use Meterpreter or Metasploit at all. And if you're not too familiar with the OSCP exam, to give you an idea, you've got a 24-hour block where you've got to exploit and gain root privileges to 5 different machines that are within that lab. And one of them is actually writing your own buffer overflow exploit within that 24-hour period. And yeah, for the entire thing, you're not allowed to use automated tools. So you have to do it all yourself.
So,
Yeah, so it really is good to get to know, the different tools you have, because it might be a case you're doing an incident response, for example. And, I'll just throw this example out there that you have been called out to an incident. And I'm a firm believer, anytime I train incident responders, I need them to understand how to read network traffic and be able to run packet captures, because you need to be able to identify what's happening on the system from a network level. Because you can quite easily identify what people are doing, if they're transferring, what IPs they're coming from, what IPs they're going to, if they're routing through DNS. And there's so much information you can gather from that, especially if it's going to take a while for the SIEM to get you all the logs that you require. As an incident responder, it's very important that you can actually get into a network with very minimal tool sets. Like it might be a very basic Linux console without any of these tools, and be able to monitor and have a look at traffic and see what's going on and start to gather evidence. So yeah, I can't stress enough that it's important that try not to rely on just a single tool as you're developing your skills.
Yeah, thanks for that, Russell. That's what I thought, and it just means that there's obviously you never stop learning, do you?
heaps of learning.
Exactly, man. I've been doing, well, I started IT in '98, and I've been doing security for most of that time, and I'm still every day studying. Because every day, man, there's more technology that comes in. I specialize in critical infrastructure, so all your industrial automations. I specialize a lot in that field, as well as doing your normal IT penetration testings and everything as well. And there is just a minefield of information to learn, and that's why I love this industry and love this job, because there's always something new. It's never dull. There's always something new to learn, and it's ever changing, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I just finished a law degree and I feel like licking windows at the moment.
Yep. Yeah, it can be quite dry, can't it?
Yeah, it's difficult, very difficult. But yeah, I can see how it's cool once you get the hang of it.
Yeah, and it's always that experience of learning and putting yourself in that challenging spot continuously, and then remember that feeling you get when you pop your first shell, without getting help from anyone, and you've just put all them pieces together, and you've got your first reverse shell.
I did that last week, and my wife wondered why I was doing a little dance.
And that's exactly right. And it's always like that. And in no matter what field you go, like if you're blue team, red team, whatever, there's always something to learn. And for me, red teamers should also be incident responders. And for me, that's a dead rule for my teams generally. If you're a penetration tester, you're going to add so much value to an incident responder and to a blue team, because you're going to be able to assist them quite quickly in understanding what an attacker is probably doing, understanding how they might be moving in the network, and very quickly gather information and put up defenses.
Absolutely. And I come from electronics and communications trade background, so the physical side of it I understand, but it's just getting that software side that, trying to get my head around. But I'm enjoying it, and as you said, you never stop learning. So
yeah, definitely. Like for me, I come from a software engineering background as well. So I was a little bit on the other side of things. It was quite interesting because I started in software engineering. Like I developed, I programmed software for the military when I joined at 18. And then, yeah, I ended up in Signals there, where, you know, just as doing the IT stuff as we do. And that was a steep learning curve for me, just learning some of the, you know, some of the infrastructure and setting up a wide area network. All of that was very, very new and challenging, which I'm quite excited. And then, you know, you move out of that, you get used to looking at normal IT, normal computer, but then all of a sudden now you're looking at PLCs, you're looking at IoT devices, you know, good old Alexas and your Google hubs. There's just always something to keep you tinkering and just finding where you have that little bit of passion. So yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
We got 3 of those Google Nests here, and I turn the microphones off all the time because I'm paranoid.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't blame you.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah, go for it.
So in regards to the exploits, I mean, I tried to reverse shell or reverse TCP and it didn't work for me. So then I tried to bind TCP, and that was only just looking through lots of research. Is there any reason, like I have heard that they may not work every time and they're a bit unstable when you do exploits?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a couple of things you got to think about there. When you're running your reverse TCP, for example, think about the port and how you're trying to catch that port. So, for example, when the difference between you're binding it to a port that is already open on the host system and being allowed via a firewall.
Mm-hmm.
If you're running a normal reverse TCP, it is quite possible there may be another application running on that port on the server side. So that will stop you from actually being able to connect with that port. There may be also a firewall or different rules in place to close off various ports as well. So, you know, in that case, I would, you know, I would suggest, you know, trying it again, but try changing the port that you're catching it on to one that you know is open.
Yeah. Okay.
And see if you can get the same one. It's also a possible, yeah, depending on what you're doing. So I'm just trying to take some troubleshooting things here. So that is one thing you'll look at is, okay, is that port open? Do I have access on that port? Is it getting blocked for whatever reason? Try that on a port that you know is open. You know, say for example, port 80, or just do port 81 or 8080 or something like that. You know, maybe just one off that port. Then if that works, perfect. It might have just been a port configuration that somewhere on the server side it stopped you. Also double check the payload that on the listener, making sure that the payload you're sending over is the same as what you've set up for your listener, because it's quite possible that that could be not exactly the same. I've done that many times, and always worth double checking. So that's another thing to check there. And also, depending on the age, or if you're finding it's not stable enough, it could be that if you're using a Meterpreter shell, it's just too much information for that system to handle. So drop it down to a basic shell instead of a Meterpreter and see if you can connect that way.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so yeah, just some couple little things. But yeah, binding generally will always work because you're going to send that over the same same port you've got access to. So it's just going to bind your traffic to that port.
Okay. So why wouldn't you just use it anyway? That's more going to work rather than trying the reverse. I suppose it just depends on the situation, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So I'd get you to put your defender hat on here. Okay. And you think about it, you're monitoring a network, and you've got a good idea of the volume of traffic that goes over various ports on your system. All of a sudden, you get a spike on a particular port.
Yeah.
And that could easily set off an alert to the defenders, who would then now be investigating and having a look at that port. So as an attacker now, you've potentially already alerted the security teams that you're doing something malicious on their system.
Okay. Thanks.
So yeah, there's just various different things. I quite frequently like to use HTTPS because it's all encrypted traffic. So once I'm on a system, I would generally pivot and use something that is more encrypted and harder for the blue guys to find. And I'll generally set up my command and control like that, and I'll pivot through a network via that. So everything's quite encrypted and generally very, very quiet.
Okay, thanks.
Is it also with the bind and the reverse is often that the firewall will block a binding port but will let an outgoing port instead of, sorry, block an incoming port but won't worry about outgoing port depending on the rules?
Exactly. So that's why it's a little bit of trial and error, especially if you come across that you do have a firewall that you're contending with. So once you know that you've got a firewall, and it's generally quite obvious when you do your Nmap scan, because all your ports will come up saying filtered. And if they're filtered, generally you've hit a firewall. And they could automatically be blocking that, and then you've got to think about how you could actually get around that. But 100% correct, the rules could be that it will allow traffic out, but it won't allow specific traffic in, or it could be set up that it will only let traffic in via a particular IP.
Yeah, cool.
Cool, some really good questions there, guys. Any others?
So I guess when you're talking about the Internet of Things, the more things that are now attached, it's just going to be more ability to be able to come in and then pivot and go into networks. So I guess it's the connections and the security of everything that is now connected.
Exactly. So
time and money protecting everything.
Yeah, it is, and it's a lot of research and development, and like it really, a lot of it comes down to how it's all mitigated. And when you start jumping on the CSA course and going further into your studies, it's really, what are you protecting? What value does that have? And then really working out that risk appetite, for example, of what kind of impact that will have for the information that protects, and then you'll start to work out, what control measures to put in place. So it's really thinking logically about everything and in a business sense, and breaking everything down. I think my computer just, there we go. Breaking everything down into what is reasonable controls, rather than trying to protect every little thing from everything.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay. Cool. Anything else, guys? If not, we could probably call it there, I'd say.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's been good having everyone on. Simeon, go ahead, mate.
I was just going to say that was really good, Russell. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, not a problem. And I wanted to do this because I thought it might help all you guys, because I've been getting a lot of private messages as well, and trying to help people in the as much as I can in the forum there. So I just thought this might give that little bit extra, seeing how I think about things. and trying to explain it, a little bit, while we're doing it, if that helps.
Yeah, I think that it's the thinking that people have to learn, because anyone, if given the a set of steps, can carefully follow them and they'll get the same results. But it's around the thinking behind that, like which steps to take.
Process.
Is the benefit of having this kind of demonstration. So
Yeah, definitely, because like, as I say, most people that come into say the red side of things and security researching, generally we have a passion for just trying to understand how things work. Why things do the things that they do. If you are a person that really wants to know that deep detail, you can quite easily do a search for what's called request for comments, and I study them quite a lot. And a request for comment, RFC, is generally what the community submit as part of a request for comment to launch a new technology. So for example, as you start looking at the OSI model and things like that, all the transport layer, absolutely everything has a request for comment, because after it gets approved by the wider community, it then gets implemented into technology. So before things are even released to the public, quite often you've got a very good understanding of how things and how applications are going to work, how protocols are going to work before they're even released in any patch or update. And so you can start to already think, okay, why does it work like that? How does it work like that? How could I possibly get it to do something else? And it's just a different way of thinking.
I'll just jump in and say, yeah, thanks very much. I got a lot out of tonight. Yeah, so I appreciate your time.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Well, have a good evening. Thanks for jumping on. I'll stop everything with the recording here. I'll stop my sharing, and